All right, good afternoon, guys. I'm Ben. I came all the way here from Australia. I'm still very jet-lagged and a little bit hungover. So today we're going to talk about one of the current problems with Intune, which is how do we get our applications in. So the session title is Automate Your Application Packaging for Intune, because at the moment it's rough. Okay. So in this session, as I just said, we're going to learn how to automate that the publishing or the creation of the package, the publishing and deployment of Win32 applications via Intune. We're going to be using Azure Devops and our CI/CD pipelines to do that. And it's just going to make your life a lot easier. So the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about application deployment in Intune as it was a couple of months ago and how it is right now. And I will tell you this right now that everything that I say now is going to be out of date in a couple of weeks. Everything in Intune is moving so fast that even the things that I complain about right now, I know that I shouldn't get too annoyed because I know they're going to be fixed. So it's fantastic. A show of hands, I'm assuming everyone here understands what Microsoft Graph is and they've played with the API. Yeah. Does anyone want to go in depth with that, or you're all pretty confident? I'll talk a little bit about it, but I think at this point everyone's pretty confident with it. We're going to go into a little bit about Azure DevOps, but I'm assuming at this point let's show of hands, everyone's using DevOps in some way. And those that don't have their hands down probably want to. Yeah, okay, cool. And then I'm just going to go straight into demo time. Before we do the demo, I just want to show you the current manual process and just show you how painful it is, because there is no native way to do this. It's very much been delivered as a minimal viable product. It works, but it doesn't work perfectly. So that's where this pipeline comes in to make it a lot easier. So let's just get straight into it. All right, so this is the very short history of application deployment in Intune. So initially, the options that we had available to us were very easy store apps. So everything from the Microsoft Store. So that's or the Android Store, iOS, Windows Phone, or the standard Windows Store. So if there's anything in the store, it's very easy to get set in and very easy to deploy out. We have the Office 365 suite for Windows 10 and Mac OS, which is actually incredible because I'm sure there's quite a few people here that have tried to maintain updates and packages for Office. It was a pain in the ass. It's not anymore. It's really, really easy. It's just click, 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 and it's done. Now, the other one was other, so web links. So if your company has websites or web apps and they want those shortcuts put on the desktop or on the computer, that's really easy. Built-in apps, I've never used. I don't know what it is, so we'll just ignore that. And line of business app. Now, line of business app was Microsoft's attempt at going, okay, so we understand that sometimes your client needs software that isn't just in the store app, but their golden future is that everything's in the store app and you don't need to worry about complex applications, which we know that's just not true, and that perfect state will probably never actually exist. The problem with the line of business app was that you could only deploy MSIs or AppX or single very simple applications. It was limited with what you could do. There were no notifications on the screen to tell you what had happened. Logging was very minimal, and if it failed, you didn't really know. It just said failed. So it wasn't great. About 2 years ago, one of the first rollouts I did for a client, we promised them that we'd be able to deploy out all their custom applications, and they had a lot of them, and they were very complex, and we immediately looked at line of business app, and we just couldn't deploy. I think the first application we had was an antivirus software that had multiple nested MSIs. It was wrapped around an executable, so the exe couldn't be deployed. It was a nightmare. So we tried to wrap it in another MSI so that we could control that a little bit, but there were just all sorts of problems, so it didn't work. So then the other option for app deployment that we have is PowerShell. Now, PowerShell only works if your device is AAD joined, not hybrid. So that's a big, important one here. If you guys are not using Intune right now and you want to, I highly recommend looking down the route of just non-domain joined AADJ only. It'll make your life better, and there's a lot of ways that you can convince your boss or your client that it's the way to go, and we can talk about that after this. So with the advent of being able to run PowerShell on the client machine, obviously you can start seeing that we can essentially do anything we want, and that's the benefit of PowerShell. So we're like, okay, cool. If we've got multiple or complex applications that have multiple files, dependencies, all sorts of things, let's just script out how we want it installed, put the installation media in a storage account, deploy the PowerShell script, pull down the installation media and run it. You can create your own logging. You can be as complex as you want. I come from an Sccm background, so I really like my logs to be complex and tell me exactly what's going on. And we've got that functionality because at the end of the day, if it's PowerShell, you create it, it will just deploy it out. The benefit of that is that we can choose to run it in the user context or the system context, which is awesome. It literally means we can do whatever we want. The problem with PowerShell is that once you deploy it, and you can only deploy it as a required application or a required device, which means it goes out no matter what. If it's successful, it never runs again. And if it fails, it only tries 3 times. You can change that, but right now there's no native way to change it. So as far as using it as like the only method of deploying complex applications, it's good, but it's not great. And it was never really designed to do what we can do with it. So then we moved on to, and this just came out October last year. It was just before PSConf Azure in Singapore. We've got, hang on, let me try this again. We got Windows apps or Win32 applications. So they basically turned around and said, okay, we understand that sometimes you guys have complex applications and it's basically a blocker for using Intune. So they came up with a solution, it's the Win32 app. It allows us to essentially package up our complex apps, our wrappers, our whatever, into a single file with the extension .intunewin. And then there was a deployment method. It unpacks the file. It's fantastic. The problem with it is that it sucks. So, as I said before, it's very much an MV or a minimal viable product. It does the job. They just got it out there really quickly because so many people were complaining that they didn't have the solution that they needed. So right now, the process is, and I'll really quickly show you what you've got to do. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is you need to go to GitHub. Should be the first response. Okay. And you need to do this every time. So you need to go, and they've changed the repo. It's now the content prep tool. So there is an executable that you simply need to download in your computer. It's just a CLI. You run that against your folder on your computer that has all your installation media. And essentially what it does is it compresses the file, it encrypts the file, and then puts all the unencryption data in a metadata file inside that as well. An example of what we're looking at here, I'm sure I've got something. Yeah, cool. Okay, so this is the file that gets created when you run that CLI. It says .intunewin, but what you can actually do here is and in here you can see that it's just a simple zip file. Inside that, we've got contents and metadata. In the contents, we actually have the encrypted binary file that has your payload. And then in the metadata, if I open this up in here, is that going to work? No, because it's still in a zip file. Let's do that. Is that big enough for everyone in the back? Yep. So it's really simple stuff that we've got in here. We've got the name of the application, the unencrypted content size and the encrypted content size, how we're running the file, and then the method to unencrypt your package. So that's all very simple. Now the problem, that's basically the worst part of the whole process. Then packaging an application is going add Win32 app. And this is now officially not in preview anymore, so it's legit and it's good to go. We go into that package, find the file we want, and then you need to, it won't start uploading until you finish this process, so you need to fill out a bunch of things. So in the name, you just give it a name, description's required, publisher's required. That's about it. You can put a logo if you're going to make it as an available application in your company portal, but generally we're just doing requireds. Program, so install and uninstall. Now at this point I'm assuming that anyone that's worked with Sccm started to notice that this looks very similar to Sccm, and that's because it was the same product team that created this solution. So if you're comfortable with packaging applications in Sccm, it's the exact same thing. So it's really, really nice that they've done that. So in here, we generally, if you're deploying a PowerShell file, it will just be file.ps1 or whatever your first. So it's what we're doing here is just going, how do we actually run the content that is inside that Intune Win payload? So however you're going to run it, if it's just a setup.exe, you just put setup.exe. Uninstall command, if you've got an uninstall command, you put that in. It is required, so if you don't have an uninstall method, I know there are a lot of applications that once they're on the computer, they're there forever, basically viruses. So I just will start and just put in command.exe. You can change this later, so there's no, like, once you hit save, it's not permanent. Install behavior, system and user. System's almost always required, unless there's those weird times where you need to install it to the user context. What do we got? Requirements. There's only 2 required things in requirements, which I find quite funny. Operating system architecture. So this is the minimum expectation that it will run on. So if you've got any 32-bit machines in your environment still, I feel sorry for you, but you can stop them from getting the application simply by selecting 64. Likewise, if you want 32 and 64, you just tick them. Your minimum operating system, we generally sit there and go 1803. I'm waiting for 1903 to become a thing in here because 1903 is absolutely fantastic with Intune. But for now, it's at least 1803. Detection rules, again, this is very similar to Sccm, so with your experience there, this is great. You go manually configure detection rules, and you choose your options. So MSI, file, or registry. MSI is quite easy, you just put in the GUID, you can do validation checks on the version number of the application. You can get as granular as you want, and I believe that if you put something in here, yeah, sure. Let's just create. No. So if you've got multiple detection methods that you require, say MSI and file, you can chain this basically. I don't know what the process is of which one goes first. There's no ordering. It's all very random. But generally, one detection method is fine. So we go okay. You can choose return codes. I generally keep these default, but again, if you're using a custom application that's been developed in-house, they'll probably have complex return codes and you just want to know how that's all going. So this is where you can put that in. At this point, you hit add, and it will start uploading that file. Now, depending on the application, it can take quite a while to upload. It is quite slow. I live in Australia. Our internet is terrible, absolutely terrible. So when I'm uploading files, I generally have to go and just get lunch, have a coffee, and pray that it doesn't crash or fail, which it can do from time to time. So this is where I found myself going, okay, why can't I have the binaries already in Azure with some way of just importing them in. So that was the main priority with me, was getting a faster way to upload files. So the GUI is fine when it works. Sometimes the buttons just disappear. Something I'll have to talk to people about. But it's not really programmatic. So we're getting clients come to us with 20, 30 applications at a time, especially if they're in an Sccm environment. We know that their packages work, but you still need to do this process one application at a time, which is time consuming, and it's not fun for anyone. So let's make it not suck. So what we do with that is we use Microsoft Graph. So we programmatically will import this data using PowerShell and the Microsoft Graph APIs. The Intune functionality in Graph is fantastic. You can get all the data that you need out of it, as well as putting stuff in. So that's how we're going to do it. But really quickly, I know most of you guys know this, but Microsoft Graph's a RESTful API. It allows easy access for almost everything in Azure. It's a single endpoint that you just use that, and you get the data from all the other endpoints in Azure, as well as the other applications like Intune, Office 365. It's extensible. You can put in your own data sets and store that information so that you can use it for yourself if you're using, custom information. And again, it's the one endpoint to rule them all. Very good. Okay. What is Azure Devops? Again, I'm sure we all know this at this point. So it was originally called Visual Studio Team Services, or VSTS. It's a place where you can store private Git repos with Azure repos. You can do CI/CD pipelines with Azure pipelines, and you can create and store artifacts with Azure artifacts. So there's a lot of double naming here. It's doing DevOps in DevOps, putting repos in repos, pipelines in pipelines, and artifacts in artifacts. I hope someone's got a sense of humor with that one, because I love it. DevOps in DevOps. Okay, so we'll just go straight into the demo. I think I'm really going well with time. Okay. So I'll just quickly show you how I'm scaffolding out my applications. So essentially what we need to, the most important thing that we need to do here is we need to go, all right, so the GUI has all those fields, or all the parameters that you're filling out. So we just need to understand how they're formed, and it's essentially just a giant JSON file. It took a very long time to figure all this out. It was a lot of just snooping at watching what's going on through Wireshark, but we got there. Yeah, lots of fun. Okay, so let's have a look at my sample application. Again, really quickly, this sample app does nothing. It just puts a file on the computer, but it's essentially showing us that we can deliver a payload and it will run under the context that we need it to. And unlike with the straight PowerShell, we can make it available. So it will be in the store, so end users can choose to run this when they feel like it. So the sample app we're going to call, so this is the JSON payload that we are using to automate the uploading into Intune. So again, we've got name, which is sample application. Hide this. Description. So as you can see here, we're going through and we're filling out those required fields and nothing else. You can get complex. You can put an application icon in. It's just encoded as base 64. You just put it in here and it shows up. Program info, same deal. Set up file path. This is the script, or this is the file that installs my application. My installation command line is the same thing. My uninstall command line, I don't have one, so we're just going to put in command.exe, and we're going to run it as system. Same thing here. Requirement of the application to run, OS architecture is x64. You can put in 32-bit if you want as well. Minimum OS, we set everything to false except for 1803. So if you don't care about your operating system, just set these to true. Detection info starts getting a little bit messy just because it's nested JSON objects, and in the future I will be using YAML for this because it's just that abstraction layer that makes it nice and easy. I just haven't had the time to do it. So for now, we have the visibility of how each detection type exists. So we've got, this one is the file system detection. So we've got a path, file name, and checking to see whether it's 32-bit or 64-bit. And we're just saying, so in this example, we're saying there's a path on the computer that will be there after the installation, which is program data contoso. The file that will be there is sampleapp.log, and all we want to make sure is that it exists. If we meet that, the application's installed, we move on. Other options, obviously, we've got PowerShell, custom PowerShell detection methods. You put your script content in there as a base 64 encoded. Enforce signature check. You can set it to true if you've got signing set up, and whether you want to run it as a 32-bit environment or not, which never do that. Very bad. We've got app registration details. So if there's a registry key that you need, you can put that in there as well. And product code is your generic GUID for your MSIs. And finally, we have return code. So again, these are just the defaults, so I just put them in. If you have custom ones, you just simply expand that out. So what we're doing is, unfortunately, that's manual because you need to understand this, but if you've got the template, you just build out from there. You've got your custom application that you know works, it's perfect, it's the greatest thing in the world. So what we do is we check that into our repository. And I'll do that now, and then I'll go through the build process with you, because we have a build process to create the Intune win file. Once that's successfully created, it's moved into an artifact, it goes to the release engine, and then the release engine hits Graph and uploads all that data. So we'll start that off, and then I'll show you some of the more complex release engine stuff. Let's have a look here. So I'm sort of cheating a little bit. I have, because I'm doing a lot of commits, I don't want it to run that build process every single time. So any application that I want to build, I put in my to build folder, which is essentially the trigger folder for the build engine. So we're just going to say psconf eu rules. Cool, we're going to throw that up, and then we'll go into our DevOps environment. So this should be relatively quickly. That's there. And this is the new one that I made this morning, which is not smart, but I did it anyway. So you can see that's running. We can quickly go in here and have a look at the process. All we're doing here is, so if you remember the manual process that I did, which was you go to GitHub, you get the CLI file, you put it in a location, you run that CLI against your installation media, and then it creates the Intune win file, packages it up, and then drops it to an artifact. So it's very quick, depending on how small or how large your file is. So if your installation media is huge, it's going to take a while. But we can see here that it's packaged. Build scripts run, artifact is dropped, or it will be. Here we go. So this is getting the config. So the build scripts it's really dense. If I have time, I'll show you how it is, how it all works. But it's essentially just passing out that JSON object and building out the Intune win file from that. But you can see it's all done here. If we hop out of this, we can see we have an artifact here. Inside that artifact, we have a couple of things. Now, there's probably a better way to do this, and if anyone knows, I'd love to hear it. But what I'm actually doing is the release code. I'm putting in my artifact so that I can run that release code in the artifact. It's a little bit messy, but it works. Because I've got my deploy.ps1 and all the required functions to do that. Yes, there's a lot. There's a lot of code to get this working. But as you can see in here, we've got the sample app, we've got the app info JSON, which we went through, and instead of the installation media, we have this sample app.intune win file, which is exactly the same as doing it manually, but the build pipeline has done it for us. So if we go over to our release, it should actually all just be done. No, it's still running. Okay. No, it's all finished. It's very quick. The application package that I put up was like 1 megabyte, so it doesn't surprise me that it was fast. But yeah, again, the pipeline process here is just download artifact, run the code to send it up into Intune and finalize the job. Really quickly, if we go in here, into Intune, client apps, and we can see the sample application. So in a nutshell, that's the process. It took a lot of time to get this running. So the argument that's been put to me quite a few times by my boss was, why did you spend so much time on this when it's just deploying one application? To which I said, no. If you can put as many applications as you want in that to build folder, and it will concurrently package and deploy them. So again, in the case of a client that comes to you and says, we have Sccm, we want to move to Intune, here's all of our applications, we know they work. You can export them, bundle them up, create the JSON objects, check them in, your job's done. So that's where the benefit of spending a lot of time initially saves you a lot of time in the future. Okay, so really quickly, just to show you that JSON object is there, we go app information, sample app, sample application publishes this. Install command is here. Our uninstall command that doesn't exist is also here. So let's go through, I'll show you how multiple applications work. Just refresh this. I'm also doing a big no-no with GitHub, or Git in general, where as part of my build process, I'm moving files around and then recommitting them, because I don't essentially want to rerun the packaging of sample apps, so I'm moving it outside of the to build folder. There is better ways to do it. This is just for the demo. So let's say we've got 3 applications that we want to package. We've got our Chrome, which everyone loves, an application that is legitimately something that we deployed, that is a 600 meg application with this many dependencies and a very, very complex installation that just kept timing out when I was manually doing it on my fantastic internet connection at home. So we'll go, yeah, and we'll just move these to the to build. This is very quick because all the information is already there, so it's just moving the Delta set around into a different folder, so this shouldn't take too long. 3 apps to deploy. Or it will.
Are you using Git LFS or something for storing the package?
It's a good question. So the question was, am I using LFS to store the binary files? Right now, no. I'm just, because this is just a demo environment. In a future state, if I is my sample app. No, I don't have it here. In the GitHub version of this that I've got a link at the end of the conference, the session. I've actually put in another object that's got nothing to do with Intune, and that is just binary URL or binary location. So what we recommend is that as you're going through this process, you put your binary media in a storage account in Intune, in a zip file, and then you can essentially, I've got this in the sample code in GitHub. It will just download that binary data as well as getting the packaging CLI application and just bundles it all up. So you're essentially not storing it, and you just get to treat all of this as your code. So yeah, I'm not doing it right now, but in the future, that's how you get around that. Yeah. Okay. So let's put this in.
That's a question about the packaging. I'm not sure if I'm getting this wrong here, but where does the MSIX packaging tool fit into this? Or have they just a different name for the one you use?
So the question was, where does MSIX packaging come into play? I don't think it does. I'm pretty sure this is just a very quick solution to go, people want multi-file installations. We don't currently have it. How do we do it? So all they're doing is zipping up the data and encrypting it. So they're not packaging it in a different method or anything like that. They're just going, we need a way that we can do multi-file without doing bits, essentially, and this is the solution. So yeah, I haven't heard that much about MSIX since they released it and it was going to be the shiny new thing. So I don't know whether there's any development going on that. Does anyone else know? No. It may very well be dead. It was supposed to be the best thing in the world. I never got it. I never got the packaging to work, and this is currently the replacement solution. Okay, so that's checked in. Our build process should work. This is going to take a really long time because that application is quite large. So what I'll do while that's happening is we'll just go through the actual build code and the release code as well. But we'll just verify that it's actually running. Okay, so that's currently running. It's happy days. We can just check this. Cool. So at the moment, it's stuck on the big part, which is it's packaging that application that is 500 to 600 megabytes in size. Should be able to. You'll start seeing logs come up when it actually runs. Here it is. So I'm doing a lot of logging just so that I can, for my own help, but I'm essentially just spitting out the JSON object so that I can see exactly how it's all running, and we can just watch it because I'm obsessed with log files, which I know is not healthy. Cool. So that's finished, it's uploading, it's doing all its stuff now. What I wanted to do while I'm waiting for this to go through, because again, this is going to take a while, is I just wanted to show you the stuff that I got really excited about while I was drinking too much last night. So I'm not super confident with building out a pipeline blind using nothing but YAML. This is something that was brought up in a session yesterday about YAML, where you can't do validate sets in YAML because it doesn't have that framework around it. So how do you make sure that the person that's creating the JSON object or the YAML object knows what they're doing? So I don't know what I'm doing when I'm creating a YAML object for a build pipeline that I've never created before. So what you used to do is, then they've called it a classic interface now, which I don't really like, but it's essentially a graphical user interface where you get to build it out just like anything else. And I, for a very long time, thought this was fantastic. So this is what it currently looks like. We've got an environment variable PowerShell script that just spits out the environment variables for diagnostic reasons. We have fetch git Intune Win32 app packaging tool, which is just a GitHub downloader. We're pointing to the GitHub location. We have our build script that is just pointing to the build script, and we have the arguments that we want to throw into that. We have our publish, and we have our commit changes back. So this is really nice for me. And what you used to do is you would go through the process of building it the old school way, and then if you wanted to stand out more environments, you can actually just go in and view the YAML from here. So it builds it for you, and then you can create the next pipeline that you need, which is absolutely fantastic. What they've done now, and I don't know how new this is. Let's go pipelines, in pipelines. So we'll go to the one that I created just a couple of hours ago, which is finished. It's now over in the release engine area. If we go edit, so again, this is just raw YAML, but over to the right, we actually have all of the tasks that you could possibly use. So for example, if we want to get another Git repo, let me just put this down here. So if you know your YAML, you just type it, it's happy days, everything's great. If you don't, you can search for your task. Git repository downloader. You can fill out the information. So actually, let's just do one that I actually know. I've got one here. Content prep tool. Paste that in there. Repository path, you can leave blank because there's a default location. Set your master, we want clean, and then we go add. What that does is it actually creates the YAML for you so that you don't need to know how to do it. So it's an education tool because you can see how it's formed, but it also means that people that don't have a lot of confidence, let me just bring that up and show you. So people that don't have a lot of confidence with building YAML from scratch can now experiment and create their custom YAML files. I will say the one caveat to this is all that you can do at the moment is just tasks. There are other things to my build environment or my build pipeline, which I'll show you here. So up the top here, I have triggers. So before I was talking about that folder called toBuild, this trigger just simply says, when a commit comes in, only include the master branch and only include it if the commit file was changed in the toBuild location. So if I change anything else outside of this folder, the build process will not start. I just went onto Google, I just searched DevOps trigger YAML and it came up. So all of these things are, lots of people are confused about it because there's a lot of people using DevOps that are more from the ops side of DevOps. So this is the first time for them as well. So there's a lot of documentation on the internet to help you with this. And the other weird one that took me a really long time to find out is with my Git write-back that I'm doing, it kept failing. I needed to put in persist credentials equals true, which essentially just maintains the OAuth credential to the GitHub repo and then checks it back in using that. So this was a weird one, but I got it working, which I'm very happy about. So basically, I now understand why they call the, sorry, go, question?
What are you changing that actually needs to be committed back to?
So, okay, the question was, what am I changing that needs to go back into GitHub? So what I was saying before is, because I'm just watching the toBuild folder, at the end of it, because I don't want to do it myself, I'm just having, I'm programmatically moving that installation media back out of that folder, and then I just want to commit that back. So that when you go back into VS Code, you've got a upstream thing that you need to sync. So it's, you know, it's kludgy, but it works. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, so I now understand why they suggest that the GUI is the classic way. YAML is easier, and when you see it all laid out like this, you can see how simple a build pipeline can be, and because of the inclusion of the task section, it just makes it that much easier. Okay, so let's leave. I don't want to save anything. So you can see here the release is still going because of a couple of reasons. So the upload process for files is very complex. So the most challenging part of programmatically sending an Intune Win file back into Intune is understanding the upload mechanism, because in the back end, it's essentially just creating a secret storage account that you can't access, and then it's sending the Intune Win file up in small chunks. And it just sits there waiting for all those chunks to go through, and then does a final commit, updates the file, and then it's there. I did not figure this out myself. There is an amazing man that works at Microsoft called Dave Folkus, who, if you guys haven't seen the stuff that he's been doing, this PowerShell Intune samples GitHub has got programmatic Intune solutions for almost anything that you can think of. His code leaves something to be desired, but it works. It works really, really well. So essentially what we did is for a very long time, you could upload line of business applications, but the Intune Win stuff it's so new that no one really knew how to do it. So we leveraged the line of business code and then just kept looking at how Azure was actually uploading the file. But just to give you an example of how complicated the Win32 application is, so this is his version of what I'm talking about. I published mine a week before him. Yeah, I'm very happy. But there's almost 1,200 lines of code just to upload a file. it's really dense stuff because, yeah, I don't, we'll talk about it after, because if you guys really want to see this, the amount of functions that are in here just to encrypt files and unencrypt files and move them around and like check to see whether it's successful, because if any of those chunks fail, then you're going to get a corrupt application. It's just mental. And I sort of feel like the majority of the complexity comes around the fact that it's in a secret storage account. So they don't want you to know that all it's doing is putting it in a storage blob. It's got to be something fancier than that. So this is the solution. But yeah, so almost 1,200 lines of code just to do the same thing. What I essentially did with my solution is, for readability, I expanded out and renamed all of these functions because they did not meet any of the guidelines. Let's have a look here, Intune when deploy. So these are all the functions that were in there. So we've got get out commit body, get out file body, encryption information. If we do this, no, we don't even use that one anymore. So there's a lot of things in here. 5 minutes? Okay, great. There's a lot of functions in here that are redundant. Invoke post request just is a wrapper for invoke post requests through REST. I don't know why it's been done like that. I just think he's stuck with a standard and he's kept with that standard. Most of the work that I've actually spent time on, I've gone and rewritten to meet my functionality, but things like this, I'm just going, it works, that's fine, we'll just leave it. The deploy code is the main thing here. So this is actually cool as well, if you guys haven't done a lot of this stuff. So I'm creating a PowerShell script here with a couple of parameters for my authentication intergraph. So username, password, and tenant ID. Obviously, we don't want clear text passwords. So in the release engine, if we go into edit, into variables, you can see that we have a username, a tenant ID, and a password. Now that password is locked, meaning that no one can see this, and if they try to change it, it just disappears. There is no way to physically get that information. It is a secure string all the way through your process, and even if you spit that out in logs, it will just be hashes or stars. So it's a really good way to store secrets. For examples, when you're doing demos or when you've got service accounts with passwords that can't be compromised. So that's really cool. I just want to check. I think that this is still running. It is. But I can show you. Okay, so that's still going because of that application that's quite large. If we go back into our Intune environment and we go into client apps, however, what we'll find is that that application that I've called a great pain for this demo is actually already there. But if we go into it, because it's still being uploaded, you'll get this error or this notification that just says, your app is not ready, check back soon. So essentially what's happening in the background is the first thing that it does is it creates the entry, makes the storage account, starts putting that information up. And then you just get essentially just hold your horses. You can't do anything until this is ready. Let's not worry about that one too much, but I will show you what it looks like when you actually deploy an application now. Because I get a sense that there's not a lot of people that are actually doing this. Okay, let's just go with our sample application because it's nice and easy. We're going to assign it to a group. Going forward, I'm going to have the build process do this automatically, but to a test group, because you don't want to have programmatic deployment of software into your production environment for obvious reasons. Okay. We're going to set it to available. And we are going to choose a group. Did that work? No. Baseline user. Okay, and save. All right, so basically this has now been deployed out to any user, and this is the key identifier here. We're deploying in Intune, we're deploying almost everything to the user object, not the device object, which is the key difference between Intune and Sccm. We don't care about the device as much anymore, but we care about the user. The user is tied to that device, so even if they have 5 or 6 devices, this is going to go out and be available to any device that they log into, which is a really nice way to work. If we jump over to my Hyper-V host, I have a device that I've pre-built. Now, this is probably not going to work immediately. But we go into the company portal, which is the replacement for the software center that everyone's probably used to. And essentially all it's doing is it's just going in and it's checking to see whether there's any applications that might be available for us to download. And there it is, sample application. Obviously, if we had an icon, it'd look nice and shiny. And I highly recommend that if you're making available applications, put the shiny icons on. Your boss will love you. We hit install. And just as an example to show how this works. So I know how, what I'm looking for, right? Because I wrote the application. I know where to look. Come on, click, do it. C drive, program data. It's too slow. Oh my God. C drive, program. Okay, so in the background, we've had, cool, the application is installed, happy days. You can reinstall, it'll run as many times as you want, but the proof that it actually ran is that we have this folder, Contoso. We have just a binary file that I just wanted to make sure that worked, and we have this sample app. This is my logging. I highly recommend if you're going down this route, or if you've never packaged applications before, or if you do it and you don't put logging in, put logging in. It makes your job really easy because there's not as much logs created in Intune than there are in Sccm. So you need to be the person that tells you what happens or what doesn't. All I'm doing is a very simple start transcript in PowerShell, which brings out all of this top information here, which is really, really valuable stuff. So we know that it was run as the system, which is really good for debugging these sort of things. We know exactly what the machine that it ran on, host application, just everything about the session that existed or the profile that existed while you were building the software. We then have a couple of things here saying moving some files, hello world, goodbye world. It's very simple. But that log file stays there forever. If you were so inclined, you could move that up into table storage and you could start looking at these globally so that you don't have to go onto the client's machine to actually troubleshoot things. That's application packaging. All right, so let me get out of this and we'll start wrapping things up. Is this going to work? From current slide. Okay, so I'm going to summarize. So Intune and Office 365 sit atop Microsoft Graph, which is why we use Microsoft Graph to work with it programmatically. It makes it a lot easier, only knowing one set of complex REST APIs. So it's something that I thank Microsoft for every day that they've decided to do this. So Azure Devops can automate the whole solution with PowerShell, which we've just seen. Build and release pipelines rock. They're really, really cool. If you guys haven't had an experience with it, get into it. That YAML stuff that I was showing you makes the whole process so much easier, and you can't really do anything wrong. And if you do, there's going to be errors, and you can just fix them. As I was saying before, always test these things in a nod production environment first. See if you can get a test environment. Don't deploy out to your client machines. If you do, have test or UAT environments to do this sort of stuff, because you don't want to go and start deploying applications to your production environment without approval. And it can break things, especially with playing with Graph. If you're using Intune at the moment, in your environment and you just want to look at graph, that's fine. Make sure you're doing get calls. Don't do any post calls. It'll be bad. Yes. And finally, Intune's awesome, and so is PowerShell. The caveat here is that Intune is really, really good, and it is ready for prime time right now. I know that a lot of people's experience with Intune is with the classic portal that was primarily around managing mobile devices. That's not what Intune is anymore. It is a fully featured management solution for all modern device management. The only problem with it right now is that if it's lacking something, you need to create it yourself. So that's good, but at the end of the day, you do need to sit down and go, okay, how much time and money am I willing to invest in creating these complex solutions? Cool. So I've got here links to my sample code for the Intune Win32 app uploads. I've also got the link to Dave Folker's stuff because, again, it's incredible. Anything that you need is there, and if it's not, he's very, very contactable. Yeah. All right, so any questions? Anyone?
Yeah.
Cool, a few.
Detection logic. You can detect by MSI product code or if the file exists or a script.
Correct.
With Sccm, you could return true or nothing. Is it the same rules there? It wasn't obvious, like you can't return false.
Cool. Okay, so the question was, and I haven't thought about this for a while, the question was, does the detection logic or the return of detection logic in Intune differ from Sccm? Because Sccm previously, if you wanted to do your own custom detection, it just had to be true or nothing at all. So even if it returned an error, that was still something, and it just went, yeah, cool, it's all good. So you needed to be very, very careful. No. I haven't actually done a lot of work with the custom PowerShell detection methods in this, primarily because when you do it through the GUI, it doesn't give you the option to turn off script signature verification, and I just haven't had the time to set that up. But I'm assuming that it would literally, yeah, it'll be a Boolean solution. That's what it's looking for. So yes, it's essentially better than the current Sccm environment.
What's your experience with applications already packaged in the PowerShell deployment toolkit and transferring them over to?
So the question was, what's my experience with applications that have already been packaged with the PowerShell app deployment toolkit? It's fantastic. So I've just started doing some work with a client in Sydney who has an Sccm environment, and they were given that solution to package up their applications. They work in Sccm, so they work in Intune. It's that simple. Yeah, at the end of the day, if you know that your application installs, it's going to install this way.
And one other question, how fast are new Intune features like dependencies for the Win32 applications reflected in the Microsoft Graph API? Do you know that?
I don't off the top of my head. I'm assuming that because all of this is just JSON, right? You're creating the manifest information. So if it exists in the back end, it's going to exist this way. Because when you're packaging the application, that's the API endpoint. But like the dependency stuff that you're talking about, which is really cool, and that's new, like a couple of weeks old, it's very cool. So you can now do chained dependency installs like you can do in Sccm. Previously, I was just writing very, very complex PowerShell scripts to do those dependencies. It just, yeah, it's fantastic. It's there because you're not hitting a different endpoint. You're just creating a different manifest. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Is it possible to create custom global conditions in Intune?
So the question was, is it possible to create global custom conditions? Are you talking about like requirements?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Let me show you. I haven't had a need to do it, so I haven't had a lot of experience with it, but it's a new feature that came out with dependencies as well. But if we go in here to our sample application, so this is the dependency stuff. I'll just quickly show you. It's very cool. They've got the dependency viewer from Sccm, so it like shows all your dependencies. I don't have the time to really get into it. But if we go into properties, requirements, and so obviously we've got here the default out-of-box ones, the operating system, minimum operating system, disk space, blah, 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 blah. You've also got the ability to go add and create your own custom requirements. With that, it's file, registry, or script.
So is this requirement then available to other applications, or do I have to create it all the time again?
Give me a context.
I think it's per application, so you have a different.
It is, yeah, okay, but okay. So the question was like, do I need to do this every time? The answer, technically, no. If you understand how your requirement works and you want to use that for multiple applications, that would get bundled into your pipeline, and that would be part of the deployment solution. You'd create your custom manifest with that information, and then you just send them all up. So yeah, you can definitely scale it out. If you're using the GUI, no, you have to do it yourself.
What about AppV and Intune?
Okay, so the question was, what about AppV and Intune? I believe AppV falls under line of business. So if we go into client apps, yeah, that's fine. I haven't done a lot of work with AppV because a lot of the people that are moving to Intune don't have any management at all. They've maybe got Windows 7 devices. They're quite under-loved, essentially. And we're just coming in and we're giving them new environments and new solutions, and we're like dealing with their old applications, which are all just like terrible MSIs with 30 dependencies. But if we go into the line of business app, what do we got? IPA, APK, MSI. It's not going to show me. Hang on. I do. Okay, so we've got IPA, APK, MSI, XAP, APPX, AppX bundles, Intune Mac, MSIX, and MSIX bundle. So AppV doesn't seem to be in there. Exactly. So yeah, I think like if you've got a lot of AppV applications, look into seeing if you can migrate them to MSIX. Ignore what I was saying about it being dead. It maybe it's not. But yeah, so it's definitely doable. I have seen examples of it. And if you know how to install AppV yourself, then do it that way, and you can do it through the Intune Win or Win32 app solution.
You indicated that were planning on having multiple applications in one repo. Was there, like, from a design point of view, was there a reason why you didn't want to have each application in a separate repo?
No, it just came out of, sorry, so the question was, why did I decide to do multiple applications in one single repo? The answer was that we started doing this stuff by creating a repository to store the custom code per client. And it's just sort of stuck. Moving forward, what I do want to do is, because I'm talking about this tomorrow as well, I'm turning everything that I'm working on in Intune into its own module or into its own repository, with the view going forward that you create a new repository for your client and you have pre-dependencies for all of those modules. So yes, the idea going forward is I actually want to move this into a custom extension or a task after seeing a talk today about that. So the idea is that it doesn't need its own repository to do this. This is just the sample. So yeah, I started bad and now I'm stuck. Cool. Any more questions? Yep. Yep. So the question was, why do I want to replace the JSON manifest with YAML? So YAML is easier to read, is the simple answer to this. What you can do, so the example that I had where I still don't like this, if I go into appinfo.json, and my detection info is just like, it's got every single detection type possible, just in case I need to use it, because I don't want to have to remember that sort of stuff. And yes, I could like write a PowerShell script to like build the JSON manifests as well. But the end state here is that I don't want to keep packaging applications. I want my operations guys or my level 1s and level 2s to be packaging these. And the easiest way for me to do that is just give them a session, go, here's how YAML looks. I just want you to go, name is this, you know, just the basic details, and then submit that in, and then all the heavy lifting gets done in the build pipeline. So the manifest gets created programmatically instead of filling out the manifest. So that's why. It's just easier for people that don't need to know the back end of the pipeline.
The thing is, I'm like asking because there's the template validation for JSON, so you can refer template validation, and then any JSON you create can be casted of the template.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, there isn't validate sets as I was saying. I think at this point, I just want to try it, and I just want to give it to our support staff and see if they are less daunted. Yeah, because it's not complex to most people, but for people that just are told that they need to push something somewhere, having to explain to them the schema for a JSON, it's too much. Whereas YAML's just a little bit less scary. So that's why I'm going down that route. Cool. I think we're done, guys. Thank you very much.